Hello students. In this video, we will learn about the food chain and energy flow through a food chain. In an ecosystem, organisms are interdependent for the basic need of life, food. Hence, there is a linear transfer of nutrients and energy among the organisms in the form of a food chain. To define, a food chain refers to the sequence of organisms through which matter and energy in the form of food are transferred. A food chain always starts with an autotrophic organism that is capable of synthesizing food and ends with a heterotroph that depends on another organism for food. Each organism in a food chain occupies an energy level called a trophic level. The autotrophs form the first trophic level and are called producers. They fix up the solar energy and make it available for heterotrophs or consumers. The herbivores or the primary consumers are at the second level. Small carnivores or the secondary consumers at the third, and larger carnivores or the tertiary consumers occupy the fourth trophic level. Based on the donors and recipients of energy in an ecosystem, the food chains are basically of three types: grazing food chain, detritus food chain, and parasitic food chain. A grazing food chain begins with producers, like small plants or grass, and ends with a tertiary consumer, or quaternary consumers. For example, a grazing food chain consists of grass, grasshopper, frog, snake, and a hawk, where the grass is the producer and the grasshopper is the primary consumer. The frog is the secondary consumer, the snake is a tertiary consumer, and the hawk is a quaternary consumer. Being at the topmost level, quaternary consumers do not have any predators. A detritus food chain begins with dead and decaying matter, and energy flows into the detrivore or decomposer, and from there to the predator. Dead organic matter occupies the first level, which is consumed by woodlouse at the second level. This detrivore is consumed by a bird at the third level. A parasitic food chain begins with a producer, but energy flows from larger to smaller animals and ends in a parasite. An example of the parasitic food chain comprises grass being the producer at the first level, cattle being the larger animal at the second level, and leech being the smaller organism at the third level. The different food chains in the ecosystem are interlinked at various trophic levels to form a network called the food web. After learning about different types of food chains, let us see how energy flow occurs through these food chains. The energy flow in a food chain can be explained by the 10% law proposed by Lindemann. According to the 10% law, only 10% of the energy contained in a lower trophic level is trapped by the next higher trophic level, the remaining 90% being lost in transfer and respiration. This means only 10% of energy is transferred from one trophic level to the next. Let us understand this with the help of a food chain. First and foremost, producers absorb light energy from the sun and store it in the form of chemical energy in them. If producers contain 1000 joules of energy in a food chain, then the 10% of it, that is 100 joules, is passed to the primary consumer. From this 100 joules of energy, again 10%, that is 10 joules of energy, is passed to the secondary consumer, and finally, 10% of 10 joules, that is 1 joule, is passed to the tertiary consumer. Hence, we come to know that flow of energy is unidirectional in a food chain. Moreover, some harmful chemicals, like pesticides, increase in their concentration as we progress in the food chain. The pesticides, which are not biodegradable, get settled in the soil, and are absorbed by plants and enter the food chain. As they are transferred to the next level, along with energy, their concentration also increases at the topmost level significantly. This phenomenon is called biomagnification. These are the details of the food chain and the energy flow through it. Summary. In an ecosystem, the food chain refers to the sequence of organisms through which matter and energy in the form of food are transferred. A food chain always begins with an autotroph and ends with a heterotroph. Food chains are basically of three types: grazing, detritus, and parasitic. The energy flow through food chains is explained by 10% law. According to the 10% law, only 10% of the energy contained in a lower trophic level is trapped by the next higher trophic level, the remaining 90% being lost in transfer and respiration.